All right, let's jump right in. We're going to deconstruct the fascinating and frankly pretty wild case of Kim versus Sun. Our goal here is to really get inside the court's analytical method and see how core contract rules apply to a very, very strange set of facts. And we're going to start with the case's unforgettable opening line. Seriously, the judge came out swinging with this one. This single sentence perfectly frames the entire conflict we're about to explore. It's brilliant. So here's our game plan. We'll start with the bloody promise, then dive into the key facts, the legal question, the rule of law, the court's reasoning, and we'll wrap it all up with the final takeaway. This is our roadmap for the whole analysis. So what is this case all about? Well, at its heart, it asks a really dramatic question. Can a promise, written literally in a friend's own blood, actually be a legally binding contract? Okay, let's move on to the first part of our analysis, the key facts. Remember, in a case brief, we're not telling the whole story. We are laser-focused on only the facts that are legally significant, the ones that actually matter to the final decision. This timeline lays out the critical events. Notice that huge time gap between Kim's investment and Sun's promise. The money was already gone. The businesses had already failed, long before Sun made this promise to pay him back. And trust me, that detail is going to be absolutely crucial. And listen, we're not talking about a small amount of money here. The promise was for roughly 170,000 US dollars. That's the kind of number that turns a dramatic, maybe even drunken promise between friends into a very, very serious legal battle. The court really zeroed in on these specific facts. First, the money went into the companies. Sun didn't just pocket it. Second, Sun never personally guaranteed the investments beforehand. Third, he was, and this is a quote, extremely intoxicated when he wrote the note. And finally, and this is a big one, his motive was purely emotional. He just felt bad for his friend. Each of these facts becomes a key building block for the court's final argument. Okay, so with all those facts on the table, the court had to answer a very precise legal question. This is the issue in our framework. This is really the whole ballgame. Does the sheer drama of this promise, the fact that it was written in blood, give it the legal weight it needs to be an enforceable contract? Now, to answer that question, the court didn't have to invent some new, complicated legal doctrine. Nope, it went straight back to one of the most fundamental principles in all of contract law. The entire case hangs on this one concept, consideration. You can just think of it as the price of the promise. For any contract to be valid, it has to be a two-way street. Both sides have to get something of value. It has to be a bargained for exchange. And here's the crucial point. If there's no bargained for exchange, if it's just a one-sided pledge, the law doesn't see a contract. It sees what's called a gratuitous promise. And you just can't sue someone for breaking a promise to give you a gift. It has no legal teeth. All right, now for the most important part, the analysis. This is where we get to see the court apply that rule of consideration to the very weird facts of this case. This is where the magic happens. This chart really lays out the court's whole thought process. On the left, you've got Sun's promise. What's the motive? Emotion, guilt, sorrow, friendship. It's a one-sided pledge. Now look at the right. A real contract requires a motive to get something in return, and the action has to be a two-sided exchange. The court took one look at Sun's promise and put it squarely in that left column. You can almost see the court going down a checklist. Step 1, is there a written promise from Sun to Kim? Yep. Step 2, okay, what did Kim give Sun in exchange for that promise? Step 3, the court looked and found absolutely nothing. Kim gave nothing new in return for that bloody note. So step 4 was a no-brainer. The promise lacks consideration. And this line from the decision is just the knockout punch. It sums up the entire analysis perfectly. The court is saying, look, the form of the promise, no matter how dramatic or solemn, it can't cure a fatal lack of substance. The blood just doesn't change the underlying legal reality. So, what was the final outcome? And more importantly, what is the key lesson you should be taking away from this wild case? The conclusion was crystal clear. The higher court agreed with the lower court. Kim lost his appeal. Sun's bloody promise had absolutely no legal force. It was completely unenforceable.
Now, this case is so important because it perfectly isolates the concept of the bargain. It teaches us that formality, whether it's blood or a wax seal, cannot be a substitute for real consideration. It's also a classic example of past consideration is no consideration. Kim's old investment was in the past and couldn't support a new promise. And finally, it shows us that motive, feeling guilty or sorry, is legally irrelevant. What matters is the exchange.
And that leaves us with one final thought to really test your understanding. Think about it. How might this case have been totally different if Son had asked Kim to do something in exchange for the promise? Even something as small as, say, forgive me publicly. That small change introduces a bargain. Could that tiny little peppercorn of exchange have led to a completely different outcome? It's the perfect question to think about for your next step.